This week for change, I brought you some good stuff to read, so we'll see how this goes. What am I talking on? Thirsty and thirsting. And actually, I wanted to make sure that I had sent that. I changed the sermon title because I thought that fit better. I've been thinking about this reading all week, and it was a beautiful reading. It is the longest time in the New Testament that Jesus speaks to anyone. And it is not to a religious official. It is to a woman who is an outsider, who is not only an outsider from the Jewish community from which Jesus comes, but is something of an outsider in her own community, if you will. But anyway, so I'm reading along, and I'm listening about this story, and I come upon this great little book that I've been reading. It's called Dog is My Co-Pilot. And I found this story about a dog named Layla. And it's really, this piece of the story is about a woman named Therese, who's kind of a bitter old pill of a person. And so the writer of the story says, Therese must have a list of every petty authority and enforcer in Los Angeles County. I think it's about. She was in her late 70s, and this is according to the author, surely mentally ill, filled with hatred, resentments, and frustrations, and that's putting it nicely. When people, having forgotten something, pulled back in their driveways and ran into their house, she called parking enforcement if they blocked the sidewalk. If a car was parked in one spot over the 72 hours limit or with a bumper in the red zone, or more than 18 inches from the curb, she called to have them ticketed.
Wow.
She called me about my garden. When I mulched my roses with straw, she believed mice lived in straw, and therefore the day I mulched, called and told the inspector I had an infestation of vermin. She then called about my compost heap. She thought it was garbage. And when I fertilized with steer manure, she said I'd strewn excrement on the premises. When I first moved in, she phoned my landlord every time I had a house guest or a visiting dog and told him I had a new roommate and or a new pet. He didn't care and began hanging up on it. Now, nobody likes this woman in the whole neighborhood except this writer's dog named Layla. Layla loves Therese. Layla, who was happy to see Therese, as she was happy to see almost anybody. And Therese fed her table scraps even though she was asked not to. Layla was perhaps the only living creature who ever exhibited even the slightest pleasure at the sight of this bitter old vindictive woman. Even Therese's own husband would sometimes raise his voice in unmistakable agony and say, Therese, you are an evil, evil person. All right, you get the sense of Therese. So one Sunday morning, the writer is in bed watching movies with her boyfriend, and the dog apparently has a dog door and is in and out and with them and then outside and whatever. And their phone kept ringing and ringing. They're trying to watch this movie. And the wife's going, God, your phone rings a lot on Sundays. And he said, let's just not answer it. So it rang like 5 or 6 times in an hour. And then there was pounding on the front door. And their house was set way back on the lot. And by then, Therese was now 80 and had trouble walking, trouble breathing. And she had walked down the drive and was pounding on their door with her 2 aluminum canes to tell them that someone had stolen Layla. And so because of that, they were able to find the person who had stolen the dog and retrieve the dog. And I thought, wow, is that what this story is about? And then we had the kind of fortunate experience of being able to see a show this past Friday night that we had not planned on seeing, and it was the Rosie O'Donnell show down in Sarasota. I don't know if anybody's watched Rosie over the years, but I have a friend who managed and now owns an off-Broadway theater in New York who had Rosie at his theater a number of years ago, and he told me some of the things that happened while Rosie was there performing, and all of the, we want to talk about drama, all of the drama and all of the language and all of the everything that would happen around her being there for performances. And so I'm thinking, I don't know if I really want to go see Rosie. I don't know if I'm really in the mood to hear, that kind of stuff tonight. And we went and heard nothing like what I had playing on the tapes in my head about Rosie. And one of the things we heard is that she almost died a few years ago. Was it a few years ago, a couple years ago? She had a heart attack and didn't know it. And she had it in the artery that's called the widowmaker, and had the attack and did not see a doctor for 60 hours. And apparently that's unheard of. And by the time she got to the hospital, they were obviously able to save her, although they did ask her wife if she had or was an organ donor. And then they came back in after they asked that, and she said, and Rosie said, I said something that I didn't think I'd ever say as this liberal feminist person in my life, and she's screaming at the doctor, anything you want to do, I'm a right to lifer, I believe. Whatever it was. So, but her whole manner now is so different. There's none of that. I don't know what to even call it, but it's all gone. And in its place, I mean, she talked about her children who, 4 of the 5 are now teenagers, and there were a lot of skits and whatever about them, not skits, but bits about them. But her whole message is about saving women from heart attacks, because women's symptoms of heart attack are so different from men's symptoms of heart attack. And she taught us a song, I won't sing it for you, but she taught us a song of how to remember the symptoms. To a pretty overwhelmingly female crowd, I would say. I know it wasn't totally, but it was, there were a lot of women there. And I thought, okay, that was Friday night. And so yesterday I'm looking at this reading again, and I'm thinking, well, those are 2 experiences of somebody who has this history, who, people don't want to be around, and then I have this different experience of the person, or someone, the dog, and then the neighbors have a different experience of the woman. And then I was reading some more commentaries on this particular piece, because it's one I'm pretty sure everybody in here has heard, right? Was this a new reading for anybody? Okay, even though it's the longest one in the New Testament. It's not a new reading, and so we all know the story. And so when we hear, no, you're not married now, no, you can't go get your husband, you've had 5 husbands, and the person with whom you are with now is not your husband. What do we think? What do we think? Are we thinking positive thoughts?
No.
No, we're thinking she's divorced, or she had bad luck, her husband's died, one after another, black widow. We're thinking, and that is really most of the interpretation about this piece that's out there if you read about it. But David Luce says, why don't we look at it differently? Why don't we assume that she's just in a really difficult situation? Even Kate Huey talks about that in her piece. And the whole point is, if you are in that culture and you did not have a husband or a son or a brother that took care of you, you were led into poverty and, quite honestly, very often prostitution. So she's not in that situation. Now, in Leviticus, we have this law, it's the Levirate law, about if you are the brother of someone who dies childless, you are to take in his wife and treat her as your own, so that you can give your brother progeny, so that he will have descendants. But if that's the situation, that person, that woman, is not considered the wife of the brother, even though she's taken in to give his brother descendants. Okay? So it could really be that she had a number of husbands who died, and the brother of one of them took her in, and that's the man she's with. It could be that. I mean, it could be, I don't know, that some other person, some other man took her in. We don't know. But he said, if you don't think about her as somebody who's kind of this loose woman, who's kind of here with this reputation that nobody wants. I mean, first of all, you got to wonder, why is she here at noon when no one else is? I mean, you don't go to the well in the heat of the day in that culture. It's a desert culture. People went early in the morning or into the evening when it was cooler. And so there's nobody there with her. She's there all by herself. And they have this kind of private conversation. His guys have all taken off to go get food in town, and so it's just the 2 of them. But it's like, what's going on here? And then they have this conversation. Now, if we're looking with the eyes that most commentators look with, that most Bible scholars look with, we're going, well, she's going, oh, so you're a prophet now, because you know my past. But if we look with the new eyes that David Luce invites us to look with, then we look at her and she's saying, wow, you're a prophet. You know my life. You know my past. You know what's happened to me. You know what my difficulties are. And you know how hard my life is. That's what is being said. And that's a whole different message. If we look at this interpretation of Scripture, it's called The Message, and it's a more contemporary rendering of the stories of Scripture. We read this is the same passage, but now this part of it says this. Believe me, when the time is coming when you Samaritans will worship God neither here at this mountain nor there in Jerusalem. Remember he had said previously, salvation is from the Jews, and the Jews believed you had to worship at the temple. And that's, Kay Huey says, they're kind of cousins, the Samaritans and the Jews, and so, but they're feuding cousins, so there's this feud that goes on. And that was the big crux between them. Well, where is the right place to worship God? Okay? Aren't you glad we don't have to worry about big issues like that anymore? But he goes on to say, you worship guessing in the dark. We Jews worship in the clear light of day. God's way of salvation is made available through the Jews. Interesting interpretation even of that piece. But the time is coming, it has in fact come, when what you're called will not matter, and where you go to worship will not matter. Isn't that a beautiful way to put it? What you're called will not matter, and where you go to worship will not matter. And the reading goes on. It's who you are and the way you live that counts before God. Your worship must engage your spirit in the pursuit of truth. That's the kind of people God is out looking for. Those who are simply and honestly themselves before the one they worship. God is sheer being, spirit. Those who worship God must do it out of their very being, their spirits, their true selves, in adoration, what we would call in praise and gratitude. I think there's a difference between being thirsty and thirsting. I think when Jesus shows up at the well after a long morning in the desert, traveling with his friends and disciples who've gone off to get food, he's tired, he's hot, he's dry, and he needs his upper dose. He's thirsty. Bless you. But I think this woman at the well, and that's how we refer to her, or the Samaritan woman at the well, Nicodemus, who didn't quite understand what it was Jesus was trying to tell him last week, and he's a high religious official, he gets named. This woman has no name. And yet, her testament is so powerful for us. Be yourself. Be spirit and in truth. Seek the truth. That's what God wants of us. There's part of her that is thirsting. Thirsting for what the water in the well can't do, but for what the living water can do. And I know I've been thirsty at other wells. And so we think if we satiate that thirst, whatever that thirst is, it could be video games, it could be going to the casino, it could be having what did I have the other night? A vodka tonic, it could be a lot of things. They were cheap. But sometimes we seek out, it's okay to sit down and have vodka tonic, just so you know. I mean, although my primary care person is a little nervous about it. As long as that's not what we're seeking to use to fill that emptiness where we really are thirsting for God. None of those things are bad in themselves. But what we know, if we've ever tried to use those to fill that emptiness, is they don't fill it. The only thing that fills it is when that piece of you, planted as God's spark in your life, in your heart, in your person, seeks to be united with the light that stepped down into darkness. That's what fills us. And when you have those moments, you know it. And you're filled. You are filled to overflowing when you have those moments. You aren't thirsty. You aren't thirsting because at that moment, God has filled you. And here's the deal. God always fills us to overflowing. Why? You tell me. Because we are called to be what? God's hands and God's heart in this world. We are called to fill others as we have done them. And so she runs off and she leaves her water jug and she brings back all manner of people so they too can know what we know, that the living water is this incredible love that we are invited to live in, to live with, to live out, and always to be full. That's really what this story is about. And I hope that we're as smart as Layla is by now. Amen.
Amen.